right, everyone, and welcome back to Recharging the Human Battery radio show. I'm your host, Dr. Stefano Sinicropi. We are on AM 950 radio. I've been gone for the last a couple of weeks, out venturing and doing some things in the wellness space, trying to create a really special environment here in Minnesota. And we had Mandy Dickey, my co-host, some amazing episodes that she was able to produce. So excited about that. But I'm back today, on my own. And as I've been gone, I've had an opportunity to really sit back a little bit recently as we have a bunch of projects in the wellness space, and thinking about why this all started. I keep getting this question. So I've been getting interviewed by people, and people will just keep asking me, well, why are you doing this? You're a spine surgeon, why the passion, why the fire about the whole thing on going down the wellness rabbit hole, being the CEO of your own healthcare, all those things you guys hear me talk about week in and week out. And sometimes, when people keep asking you why, you really need to have a little bit of a quiet moment and really go back, to how it all started. And I know I talk about this a little bit, but I thought today on the episode, since it's just me, myself, and I was going to talk about the incredible experience that I've had getting into the media space and being able to have incredible guests on my podcast, and then of course do the radio show. But I wanted to talk about some of the guests I've had on the podcast and what I've been able to learn, and why, it's such an exciting thing to be able to have guests on the show week in and week out and talk about topics that I think are not talked about enough. I mean, we talk about them, but do we go deep enough? Do we go to that place where you guys, the medical community, everyone really understands how dialed in we need to be to really understand how much we can improve the functioning of the human body, people's well-beings, people's mental health, physical health, fight back against the chronic obesity crisis, the chronic disease crisis, the chronic crisis of dementia, right? The mental health crisis, which is really ravaging our society and our communities. Anxiety, depression, all these things have never really been worse. And all of us that are going into this media space, we're all doing it in our own way, because some people that you listen to may resonate with this audience, and some people may resonate with that audience. So, I and the people that, I'm working with, we're trying to do it in our way and trying to hit a segment of the population and of the medical population and industry to really get the message across that only if we put our resources together can we make the significant impact that we need to make. And I know you guys have heard my plea to the general community in how much change is required in order to really make an impact and make a difference. Because honestly, the reason I did this in the first place, I'll talk about it on the other side of the break here, is because as a long-standing physician, surgeon, I've seen so many people that are suffering. It's heartbreaking to me. The more I started educating myself on what's out there, the more I started talking to these experts, the more I read, the more I surrounded myself, I just was almost overwhelmed with a sense of purpose, a sense of energy to bring this out to the world in my way, right? You might not all love what I have to say or the way that I say it. You might resonate with somebody better, but I'm certainly going to keep saying it. And I hope that you keep tuning in week and week out. So on the other side of the break, we'll really get into some of the incredible guests I've had on my show, what I've learned, and then talk about how we can do things even better going forward. And we are back on Recharging the Human Battery Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Stefano Sinicropi, flying solo today. We are on AM 950 radio, and it's all about passion and why we do what we do. And again, like I said on the the beginning part, I get asked these questions, so I have to really answer. Why am I doing this? And the truth is, when we are ignited, when the fire is ignited with us, it is such an amazing thing that we as humans are able to do. If you are able to take the fire, the passion that you have for a certain topic, a certain subject, a certain research thing for your kids, for your whatever it is, whatever you are deeply passionate about, man, we can make a change. And that could be from like little small changes to, hey, I'm really passionate about, rearranging this collection and making it better, to I want to change the world. I want to be the next president of the European Union, whatever. But bottom line is, passion is everything. So I wanted to really talk about some of the guests I've had on my podcast, because for me, one of my passions is just really lifelong learning. And I wanted to combine that with my passion for health and wellness. And that led me to develop my podcast called Wellness at the Speed of Light, where we feature really guests from all walks of life, but we try to connect and weave these ideas into how do we make people feel better? How do we get them back feeling like their old selves? How do we get them out of that brain fog, that mental health crisis, that physical health crisis? People that just want to learn about new ideas and techniques and biohacking and all these other things. And it's something that's really passionate to me. And so let's talk about some of the guests I've had. So I've got to start with Rudy Ruettiger. Okay, so I don't know if you guys know who Rudy is, but Rudy it's a famous story. I urge all of you to go out and watch the movie Rudy. It is it's incredible. I've literally watched it like 15 times, and I mean start to finish, not like my favorite parts. I mean start to finish. And so Rudy Ruettiger was basically this not extremely talented young man who grew up, in the area of Notre Dame. Always dreamed about being a Notre Dame football player and going to Notre Dame. Now, unfortunately, he went to high school. He wasn't a great football player by any means, wasn't being recruited or anything like that, but he also was not a very good student either. But he really wanted to go to Notre Dame. Everything to him was about Notre Dame. It wasn't about him. It was about this idea, this ideal. And everything, it is a story of passion. It is a story of pride. It is a story of hard work. So anyway, he ends up going to the junior college, which is right across the street from Notre Dame. Basically, nobody believed in him and his ability to get to Notre Dame and play football. He got his grades up. He worked so hard with that singular purpose of going to Notre Dame and one day having the opportunity to play football. It is, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps right now as I'm speaking, because he kept trying and trying, kept getting rejection letter after rejection letter. Finally, he got the letter that basically said he got in, which was amazing. And so he told everybody, and obviously his family was proud, a little bit shocked, but proud. Got into Notre Dame, said, oh, I'm going to try out for the football team. And if you see his stature compared to the others that were playing in Notre Dame, it's crazy. You got to watch this movie and watch his documentary. That's incredible. Anyway, he goes to the school, fights, gets on the practice squad because he is the hardest worker in the room. And everyone knows it, becomes an inspirational figure on the Notre Dame football team. And so the amazing part is, finally, the last game of his senior year, he got on in his junior year, right? But the last game of his senior year, he was always promised by the previous coach that he would play, but then they switched coaches. He didn't think he would play. There was a big groundswell amongst the players to get Rudy to get on the field. They finally put him on the field for the last couple of seconds. And it's a great story behind it. He comes on the field And he, in his basically his first play on defense, he sacks the quarterback and is carried off by the Notre Dame players. It's the last player to ever be carried off the field in the history of Notre Dame. And so his story of perseverance is incredible, but it doesn't stop there. After he did that, and we are all Rudy, by the way, because we are all in our own way underdogs. And I can't tell you how many times I've been told you can't do that. Well, why are you doing that? Why are you trying to go to med school? Why are you trying to do this? Oh, now you're the wellness guy. Oh, you want to build these clinics? No, no, no. And so like a story like Rudy could not resonate with me more. When he was done with that, he decided he was going to make the movie. It took him a decade before he could get this movie made. And the story behind it is just incredible. But this man could have not have been more determined, and it shows you where your passions can bring you. And finally the movie was made, then the documentary, and then he had a Broadway show, which I also urge you to watch. It's on, it's on one of those channels. I think it's Amazon or Netflix. I forget. I watched it a little bit ago. But really, really incredible story. And the reason I start with him and he was one of my more recent guests, is because the passion, the inspiration that he brings is something that is so near and dear to me. And I think that if we are going to make the type of impact in healthcare and the type of impact in changing people's lives and changing your lives, in making you guys the CEOs of your own health, it's going to take not just me, it's going to take you, it's going to take an army of people that are passionate about this stuff to really spread the message. And they're going to tell us no. People say, well, no, how can we do this? Right? The sugar, the food industry is so powerful. The pharmaceutical industry is so powerful. There's all these powers that be. They say it can't be done. They say, we can't turn around our disastrous place right now where we spend the most per capita in the world on healthcare, but yet we're not improving at all on our life expectancy, right? Our morbidity is getting worse. Every chronic disease is really worsening, right? The only thing that's really gotten better is maybe people smoke less, but they're still getting sicker because of the sugar and all these other things that we talk about, the toxins, the mass media that people are consuming. We're not well as a society. And there are people that say, yeah, I'm wasting my time, doing this. And then I talk to a guy like Rudy and I get even more fired up, right? I mean, it was amazing. And I urge you to watch that and just watch everything about him, but watch our podcast together, because this is a guy that didn't even have his name on his jersey. And this is a lesson also that I want to, really take from that. He had pride in his organization, in what he was doing, in his mission. And he makes it clear it's not about him. I feel the same. It's not about me. It's not about whoever your favorite, doctor is or expert or social media influencer, whatever. It's not about us. It's about the larger mission. We don't need our names on the back of our jerseys. We need to ooze passion about the stuff that we're doing. So please, follow Rudy, watch his podcast. It was amazing. So again, I don't have time to talk about all of the things, but I want to talk about some of, the more, memorable, people on my show. I had a Dr. Christy Prouse on my show. And the reason I really want to talk about her is she is a classically trained OBGYN, just like I'm, a classically trained spine surgeon. And she suffered herself with episodes of burnout, and she was getting really unwell. And, Christy decided that she was burnt out. Her patients were burnt out. Her patients weren't doing well in the traditional medical system. So what did she do? She decided to optimize her own health through hormonal manipulation and other things, and fixing her cortisol problem and all her burnout. She talks about that beautifully in our podcast together. But she also made the life-changing decision to step away from all of the traditional OBGYN practice, that the way she was practicing, she did not feel that she could practice that way, and made the decision to step out of that environment despite the fear. It's scary when you're doing stuff out of your comfort zone. It's very scary. But again, that passion, that fire was lit, and she decided to step out, partner with naturopathic doctors and other types of providers, and start integrative health clinic where she practices. She now is involved in all these different ventures, is incredible in women's hormonal health, which we talk about really very extensively on the podcast. But it was a story in courage. And again, when I talk to people like her, it really inspires me because I feel like that too. And we've talked about that. Now, I'm doing it a little bit different where I'm still like wildly passionate about spine surgery, because spine surgery is spine surgery. If you have a severe problem and you have a bad scoliosis or you have severe compression on your spinal cord, that just needs to be fixed. But the medical part of it, the treating patients in an integrative medicine functional approach, that is something now that I'm very much passionate about practicing outside of the traditional medical system, because I think that we are missing so many things. And when I talk to providers like Dr. Prouse, it really does truly inspire me to move forward with these projects and really bring these other ways of thinking out into the community, the society, and then beyond. So a very similar podcast that I did, and it was a wonderful and this is somebody that I followed actually for a long time. I had read his books way before I had the opportunity to have him on my podcast, was Dr. Robert Lufkin. And he is really known for his most recent book, and it's Lies I Told in Medical School. Now, this sounds dramatic, and it's interesting, because if you read that title, you would think, oh my God, this guy is some radical physician that's spewing all these crazy, wild theories about stuff. No, the first thing we talk about early in our podcast is the fact that he could not be more of an insider, conventionally trained MD physician in the United States. So he is the insider of insiders. This is a man who's been published. He's done stuff. He's at excellent, academic institutions in California, world-class institutions. But, guess what happened to him? Like what happened to Dr. Prouse? He was following traditional guidelines that are laid out in Western medical practice. He was getting sicker. He ended up with 4 chronic diseases despite getting advice from traditional medical care. And again, he thought he was following everything. And then he realized that a lot of the things that he had been teaching, the ways that he was trying to treat his own chronic conditions, were absolutely plain old wrong. And again, he's not trying to villainize anybody. I'm not trying to villainize. We're trying to get the message out that until you really look under the hood, okay, until you really say, you know what, I'm saying this, okay, I'm spreading this dietary guideline. I'm discussing these guidelines for cholesterol. I'm discussing these guys. What is that based on? What's the foundation of that? Who was behind that? Who had their hands behind this, and who is benefiting from those things? Once Dr. Lufkin did that, he completely changed his ideas about how to address chronic diseases. He is a vehemently anti-sugar physician. He posts about this frequently. I think sometimes he posts like 4 times in a day. Obviously, he has a team, behind him too, but really talking about the damaging effects of sugar. And this is just one thing, and he talks about a lot of things, but the passion that he has behind debunking myths that we still spread today is something, again, that is so inspirational to me when I see that, because he has no fear in talking about that. Again, he's an insider. Who are his colleagues? Traditionally trained physicians at his institutions. But yet they are now beginning to really accept the things that he's saying. Why? Because, as I always say, he's not just saying it for the sake of saying it. He's certainly not saying it for the sake of being controversial. I'm not trying to be controversial. I'm trying to tell the truth. And that is what, when I get around people like him, people like Dr. Prouse and some other physicians that, we'll get into, I'm inspired. Think about it. Think about, you talk about recharging the human battery. We're always talking about like recharging our own batteries. How about recharging the human spirit when we have a passion, and then just being around people that are basically bringing it, right? They're bringing the fire in this wellness space, and it is contagious. And so I'm already fired up, and then I'm around these people, and then it's, by the end of our podcast, everyone's trying not to hyperventilate because we're so excited about getting this message out into the world. And so I encourage you, please, listen, to some of these passionate people, on the podcast, because they're incredible. I've had other one. I actually had his colleague on the show too, Dr. Sidoroff, who talks about resilience, the need for resilience, talks about burnout and how bad the crisis is, in burnout, and all of these pillars. And he has 9 pillars that we can utilize to become more resilient. Again, we got into the whole discussion of why these things are not really taught, but how they are in some ways some of the most important things that potentially we need to be teaching, not just to the general population, but also to physicians that are trying to make a difference and an impact. We had on the show doctors that are talking about things like biohacking and other potential things that can dramatically improve our well-being. So I just want to mention a couple, because one of the spaces that I'm most, and you guys know this, I'm most passionate about is photobiomodulation. And so we're going to I'm jumping because I really just want to talk about learning. So I just want you to get kind of an understanding about how much we can learn just by talking to people, by listening, because I don't just listen to experts on my own podcast. I listen to other podcasts and try to consume all this information so I can know better. So let's talk about a little bit about photobiomodulation. We've talked about this ad nauseum on the show if you've listened to previous episodes of recharging the human battery. And so photobiomodulation is actually using light at certain wavelengths and frequencies to penetrate human tissues, to get into our cells. The light is absorbed in the mitochondria, which can then create a chain reaction, which allows the mitochondria to produce more energy for the cell. So it does a couple things. One, it produces more energy for the cell, and that energizes the cell, so it can energize your immune system. So you're boosting your immune system, you're boosting your brain cells, you're doing all these things. But also the mitochondria, which have their own genetic material, then send messages to the cells. And the messages, if we could translate them, I'll give you the lay terms. The lay terms are this: don't die, get healthier, work better, right? And so those are things, it's incredible. And so we use the analogy of photosynthesis all the time, right? Photosynthesis, that same reaction that allows plants to make energy, allows us to make energy if we use the same wavelengths. So I've had world-class people, on my show. So let's talk about somebody that calls himself the Fro, Dr. Scott Sigman. So he is incredible. And I urge you to follow him on social and, watch the podcast, watch his TED Talks. Incredible, incredible gentleman. So Dr. Scott Sigman is actually the CEO founder of a company called Ortho Laser. They are a franchise that is rapidly expanding throughout the United States, and they offer laser therapy for musculoskeletal pain, for musculoskeletal and back pain, shoulder pain, hip pain, you name it, spine pain. And he has done so much for promoting the use of light and laser therapy, for helping patients with FDA cleared indications, which are helping people with musculoskeletal pain. And the reason I am so inspired by Dr. Scott Sigman is not only is he aware of the benefits of photobiomodulation, light and laser therapy, but he is active with his podcast, with his TED Talks, with his clinics that he's developing. So I can't think of a better mentor for myself to look and see what is he doing. I mean, we're doing it in a different way, but the way he's doing it, the passion that he brings is really, truly incredible. Now, I've had his, the people, I would just say, a predecessor of Dr. Sigmund, who is, we would consider him the guru of light therapy. He's the most published person in light therapy in the history of this. His name is Dr. Michael R. Hamlin. He now lives somewhere up in the UK. He's retired. He basically is on every early publication on photobiomodulation. I had the privilege of having him on my show. And again, this man has been retired now for a while, but the passion, the energy that he brings in the need for the general medical community to start accepting light therapy to treating so many different chronic conditions and chronic conditions of the brain, that just oozed through in his podcast. And I really love talking to him because he would say things like this: anyone that has a brain illness or condition, 100% should be being treated with light therapy to their brain. Okay. He is at a point now where he's just going to say it. He's just going to call it like it is. And this is something that is definitely becoming more and more known. There's a lot of research and there are more and more publications coming out on the uses of light therapy for the brain. And the future is so bright. And that brings me into my next guest. Okay, Dr. Paolo Cassano, who runs the light therapy lab at Harvard. He's an MD, PhD. He actually studied under Dr. Hamlin. And he has been now able to take a lot of the ideas from Dr. Hamlin and from other people that are in this space and expand it. And he is really on the cutting edge of so much research in light therapy. And I had a wonderful conversation with him, have gotten to know him and become more friendly with him and correspond on light and laser therapy. And I think I've talked about this before on the show. The benefits from light and laser therapy that he's seeing in his lab and the work that he's doing in some cases is so dramatic, he can't be more frustrated that this has not really picked up and become more mainstream in the medical community. And we talked about both of our frustrations on preventative medicine, preventative health, using, and specifically on photobiomodulation in that case, and there not being enough dollars allocated to studying things that are non-medication, non-procedural, can be tremendously preventative and can treat so many different conditions, but yet where are the dollars? Whereas for procedures and for pharmaceuticals, there couldn't be more dollars, right? I mean, those things get funded, but even some of the projects he's working on where the preliminary data is incredible, those projects are not being funded. So couldn't have learned, more from him about the frustration that we're all sharing. But again, what's it going to take? It's going to take a Rudy-like effort from all of us to just say, you know what? We may not have the tools right now, but we're going to give it everything that we have, right? We're going to surround ourselves. We're going to be inspirational. We're going to do this. And one day, maybe all of us collectively, if we work together, we get carried off the field, so to speak, metaphoric. We get carried off and they say, you know what? These guys and gals were part of this revolution in health and wellness, and they made a difference and an impact. And we made a difference and an impact in your health and your family's health, because you know how passionate I'm about this. Some of the information you're getting is not right. I'm not saying that I certainly don't have all the answers. That's why I surround myself with all these people. And I'm not saying they have all the answers. But you know what? If collectively we all put our minds together and we keep an open mind and we really start sifting through what's real, what's not real, what's safe, what's not safe, what should people be doing, what are the influences? If we all do this together, then we certainly could make a massive, massive impact. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit. Again, we don't have that much time. I'd love to talk to you about all these people, that I've had on the show. But one that was really inspirational to me was Dr. Antonio Webb. Dr. Antonio Webb is an orthopedic spine surgeon. He's down in Texas. He has a massive practice. He's very well known on his social media. He does a lot of incredible educational things, but he's also a big inspiration to me because what he gives back to the community. So he has a philanthropic organization where he gives back to the community, does all these other things. And the reason that I bring him up in my podcast is because, wow, you talk about somebody that was in an environment that was not conducive to ever being able to get into medical school. I mean, he talks about, point blank, he's like, most of the people in my family ended up in prison. You don't hear that much from people that ended up becoming, orthopedic spine surgeons. And what does he do with that? He becomes a world-class surgeon. He teaches this stuff to other people. He's extremely active on social media, identifying a lot of problems and things more. I mean, he's really focuses more in the spine world, but he actually also goes outside of this. He talks about chiropractic care and all these other different things. Really, really interesting figure. But the most important thing is again, another guy. Remember like how we started this? We're all Rudies. You talk about a guy that's a Rudy. Think about being in that environment. I mean, his mom ended up being paralyzed and she was a drug addict, right? From her drug addiction. So he could not be more motivated to give back to the community, to give the same opportunities to young people. And we also got into something that's near and dear to my heart, and that was the fact that we are both heartbroken, and some of my other guests, we've brought this up, in the fact that as physicians, only 40% of us would recommend becoming a physician to the younger generation. And we did a whole burnout episode here on an earlier episode of Recharging the Human Battery, and we brought that up. But yet here we are, wanting no more than to give the young people an opportunity to do what we do, because it's such a blessing. And one, we get to take care of people, which is it's a gift. I mean, it's a gift to us to be able to do this. It's a pleasure. It's a privilege. I'm always in awe of the ability to do what I do. Same thing, with him. And we both want people, other physicians, to also be in that same boat, and encouraging everybody to get in. Yes, there's that. Yes, there's problems in the medical system. Yes, there has to be a lot of reforms coming down the pipeline, but it is such an amazing thing to be able to do. And honestly, listen, you guys hear me criticize, what's going on in the medical community, what's going on in the way we do stuff. But guess what? If I wasn't an MD and a spine surgeon and the stuff that I've been able to do, maybe I couldn't get the message out. So, well, number one, I'm super blessed and I love doing spine surgery. I love taking care of your spine health, but it also allowed me to see tens of thousands of people and really learn about what is going on, what's wrong, in our society right now, and how to really help to make a difference and make an impact. So hopefully we can help our young people, move forward. One of I had some incredible, people talking about mental health crisis. I had Dr. Fuzan Zine on the program, who has her own radio show. She's big on social media. She's a psychotherapist. It was almost a psychotherapy session on me. I felt like amazing. I felt at complete ease, but we talked about all the different problems in society that we really could address, and how much resource is necessary right now to help people with their mental health, and how it's never been worse. But boy, what a breath of fresh air. And I encourage everybody, if you need some psychotherapy, look her up. She's incredible. I also had Dr. David Barron on the podcast. He is the psychiatrist to the U.S. Olympic team. He's been doing this. He's done like the last 4 or 5 Olympics. He's been around for a long time. We discuss PTSD in athletes, things like, Simone Biles and Michael Phelps and all these other athletes he's worked with. And we talked about mental health. What I loved about my conversation with Dr. David Barron is the fact that he is very big on something called lifestyle psychiatry, and lifestyle medicine has really taken on a life of its own, so to speak. And lifestyle medicine is becoming very, very big. The amount of people that are joining these organizations looking at preventative ways that we don't need to have people become ill with mental and physical conditions is incredible. And he is really one of the forefront proponents of lifestyle psychiatry. And what I loved about him, and we got into this big discussion about how when treating mental health, or physical health, but really in mental health, that non-medication options are always the best way to go. And then you add the medications over time and not the reverse, which unfortunately it's become. Obviously, there is plenty of role for medications in the psychiatric world, and many people absolutely need medications. Otherwise, they would be very broken and it's dangerous and all these other things. But for most of the bread and butter stuff, obviously, looking at ways to do this with non-medication options. We also talked about some of the biohacking that I'm, excited about, and how potentially that could be weaved into the whole, psychiatric, world at large. And I think that photobiomodulation, oxygen therapy, all the stuff we talk about with dieting, it's going to become a huge part of the way that we address people's, mental health through psychiatry. So really, really, exciting stuff and exciting people we've had on the podcast. One of the people I had on the show, just to kind of change this up just a bit. And maybe we'll talk about some of the other guests, because there's really some important, really important points. But I do want to talk about one episode that I did that I was particularly excited about, because it's something that, again, we talk about so much, and that is the importance of us as physicians or other experts or just people that are really dialed into whatever they're into, that really want to get to the bottom of whatever, and whether that's psychiatry, whether that's mental health, whether it's food choices, or whether it's everything, or whether it's rock collections. It doesn't. I want the importance of getting people out there. So I had Dr. Betsy Grunch. She's a well-known neurosurgeon. She's one of the biggest neurosurgeons in the social media world. I mean, she's got like a couple million followers on TikTok. It's pretty impressive. And I had a conversation with her, and it was about what we can do to get our colleagues on the road show, like we're doing, doing podcasts, doing radio shows, out on social media, speaking and educating and really getting people. And it was incredible. And I think that any provider or just people that are just interested in getting their message out, if they were able to hear that episode, how could you not be inspired by Dr. Grunch and what she's been able to do? And I tell you, if you look at her social media stuff, you will see, like, this is somebody that is a celebrity on social media. Now, does she use that celebrity just for fun? Absolutely not. It's to get messages out. She does an entire series on education, on neurosurgical topics, spine topics, this and that. And again, another person that absolutely inspires me, and sees that if we are able to build a big enough audience, and by the way, thank you all for listening to our show and just following me in general, and helping me on my journey, because I could tell you, I learn from you guys all the time, your comments, everything you're saying. But if we can build an audience, and the audience really can develop trust in us, then if we are dedicated, if we're passionate, if we're doing the research, if we're trying to bring you smart people, smarter than us, being people that can really educate, then we can make a huge impact on you, your families, your lives, get you healthier, and above all, make you guys CEO of your own healthcare. So on that note, our time is getting short. We'll wrap this up on the other side of the break. But bottom line is, I could not be more blessed to talk to these people day in and day out. And most importantly, could not be more blessed to be able to do this and have a chat with you guys week in and week out. We'll see you on the other side. All right, and we're back for the final segment on Recharging the Human Battery Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Stefano Sinicropi. We're on AM 950 radio. And boy, I've really enjoyed my time with you guys today. Just talking about my why, my experience. Like, why am I doing, why am I doing this? Why am I so passionate about bringing this information, to you guys? And we focus today on my experience with the podcast and bringing on these guests. And I just want to finish with this segment. What really drives me now, I talked about like why this guest or why that guest may have, really fueled my fire. But I'm going to tell you the thing of all of that stuff that really drives me the most. And again, I just get a little personal and just so that you guys know who I am, so that you know that I'm really I want to do this because I want to help you. I want to help the world. I want to help people around me because I just see suffering, and I'm really inspired by that. But I am a people person. I love people. I love talking to people. And I'll tell you the number one thing that I love doing on my podcast is I love to connect with people on a deeper level. And some of these people, I've never met them in person, right? I'm just connecting with them for the first time, or I'm having like a 10-minute a little introduction session with them before we get started in the podcast. But if we are able to let our guard down and really talk to them, and because I really want to get like, what do you know? I want to get those I just want to get their feelings on what's wrong and how we can fix it, because I want to get their passion out. Not everyone is going to have that same level of being hyper or whatever, but getting out of them. And I will tell you what I've loved is a lot of my guests after our podcasts have told me in private, geez, I've never shared that publicly before. I've never, I've never really said that. I really wasn't expecting to go down that line of discussion, and on that, and on that note, just to share with you, I had, one of my favorite podcasts, that I've done was with Dr. Richard Hart. He is a general surgeon who is a well-known, liver surgeon who actually was a world-class wrestler, was a Canadian Olympic champion, and on his show shared with me so many intimate details of his struggle with burnout, his own personal struggles with addiction, and how he got out of that deep, dark hole. And now he has his own company helping people utilizing virtual reality and all these other tools to get people to function on a higher level, helping them with burnout, helping them with performance, helping them with other things. But I can't tell you how much it means to me when these guests tell me that some of the things that they've discussed with me, they've never talked about it. I mean, some of these people have been on, they've been on CNN, they've been on big time shows. I mean, some of these guests are big guests, but yet they'll share with me and say, you know what? You're the first person that's got it out of me. And again, that drives me and inspires me. I want to get their personal stories, their own struggles, because guess what? They, myself, we're all just like you. I struggle like you do. They struggle like you do, right? We are, man, we're all underdogs, right? In one way or another. But if we rely on each other, if we treat each other with respect, with dignity, listen to each other's ideas, understand, what it's all about, and that's just living our lives to the best that we can. Boy, we can make a huge impact on the world together, because honestly, at the end of the day, we're all the same. We all want the same things. And so let's work together. Let's all be CEOs of our own health, our well-being, and then help other people to be CEOs of their own health and well-being. And man, we can make it a much better place to live in. So on that note, we'll see you on the next episode of Recharging the Human Battery Radio. This has been incredible. I'm your host, Dr. Stefano Sinicropi, and we will see you next week right here on AM 950 Radio. Thanks so much for joining us today.